Hello and welcome to the 12 Months to Marathon podcast with me, John Hill, the running podcast for the over 35s with Marathon Dreams, episode 20, the myth of motivation. Now this is quite a passionate subject for me because I've been coaching fitness, weight loss and running for 15 years, and motivation is obviously one of the main things, themes, words, whatever you want to call it, that I hear the most. And it's something that we all deal with, or we all think we deal with, and I want to just cover it off today because I covered it with my running community this week on our group coaching call, and I wanted to do it in a snapshot for you today just to give you some insight into how I've found out about motivation, what I've found out about motivation, and how I think it's a bit of a myth. So we'll get into that. So what's going on with me at the moment? So Spring Marathon, as we know, is booked, if you follow this for a while, in March, and we start training for that next week as I record this. So I've been upping my mileage a little bit. I've actually really enjoyed upping my mileage, to be honest. Distance running is my happy place, and it's been really nice to up my mileage and get into that space again. So I've been doing that. Did some intervals as well. Hamstrings held up fine. If you've been following this for a while, you know I had a little hamstring niggle, so that's all good. So we crack on to Spring Marathon training starting next week. So we'll get straight into this one. Now, what I want to do is, there's a wonderful expression which comes from Wayne Dyer, the late great Wayne Dyer, which is when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. So when it comes to motivation, you need to change the way you look at it. So the first thing to let you know, which you've probably heard before on this podcast, is that motivation is not a thing. It's not a physical thing. It's not something you can get. It's not something you can make. It's not something that you can measure. Okay, so you can't be 50% more motivated, for example, because it's not a tangible thing. And that's a good thing to start with, because if it's not tangible, that means that it's what's called a state. And a physical state or a mental state is something you can elicit at any point, if that makes sense. Like when I did my neuro-linguistic programming training, NLP training, over 10 years ago, one of the things that really stuck out to me was this concept of when somebody says, for example, something like, I want to be more confident. Well, you don't need to be more confident. You need to be more competent. You need to be doing to be able to feel like you can do something by doing it. And motivation fits into that category. There are a lot of people at the moment, at this time of year, as I record this in November, who think that they are going to be, quote unquote, more motivated in January because Christmas is done and so on. The problem is you don't get more motivated by doing nothing. And that's why a lot of people fail at, say, New Year's resolutions or the whole New Year thing, because they assume they're going to be more motivated because of a different time of year. And you're not. It's not something that just happens, and it's not something that comes around your house and knocks on your door and says, hello, I'm motivation, let's go for a run, or let's go to the gym, or whatever it might be. So you have to change the way you think about motivation, because if you think you're lacking motivation, you're not. You're actually not. You're lacking something else, which is similar, but it's all about the positioning of it. So let me start off by explaining how motivation works. Now, I believe the word motivation, motive, comes from, I think it's derived from a word that basically means to move. And that's the clue you need. So people think it's motivation first, movement second, results third. Okay, so people think the current paradigm is motivation, then you move, then you get results. And that's not how it works. It's movement first, then results, and then motivation. And let me explain that to you. So let's say you've done something, you've achieved something, you've been for a run, for example, and it's been a great run and you feel good about yourself. How motivated do you feel just after that run's finished? You probably feel quite, quote unquote, motivated, whatever that is, because it's obviously just a feeling and it varies person to person. So if you feel quite, quote unquote, motivated after that run, that's telling you that because you've moved and because you've got a result of the movement, you then have the feeling. You can't get the feeling unless you do the movement and get the result, because you don't know, you've got nothing to base it on. Does that make sense? So if you haven't done anything, how are you going to be motivated to do something when you haven't done it? And there is a way of thinking about that, which I'll explain in a second. So the first paradigm I want you to think about is shifting from I get motivated, then I move, then I get results, to I move, then I get results, and then I get motivated. Because the more you do, the more you can do. Okay, and it goes back to the confidence versus competence thing. The more competent you are, the more confident you are. It's as simple as that. So if you feel more competent or good at something, you feel more confident. I'm a very competent runner, so I'm confident at running. I don't have any fear of running any distance up to marathon because I know I can do it. Now, the pace is a different conversation, but I have no fear at all about running marathon distances or anything like that because I know I can do those distances because I've done them before. Yeah. And that's not because I'm arrogant or because I'm a show off. It's because I've done the work. And if you've done the work, you can just say, well, I've already done it, so I don't need confidence or I don't need because I've done it and I've got the experience. So what I want you to do is, especially if you're thinking to yourself, oh, I'll be more motivated in January, I'll start again in January, I want you to change that because it's the 20th of November as I record this. You've got plenty of time left before the end of this year to start getting some movement in place so you automatically feel a little bit more quote-unquote motivated because you've moved. That's the first thing. The second thing is when people say they lack motivation, what they actually lack is a payoff. And it's a different thing. So motivation is the before, payoff is the after, if that makes sense. So again, motivation before, payoff after. So you get your payoff after you've done the activity. So like I've just said there about the result, yeah? If you do something, you get a result for doing something, okay? That's your payoff. So let's say you want to run 5K, yeah? If you think about before going for your 5K, I don't feel very motivated to do this, but then you thought, well, actually, if I do it, what happens? So what happens if I don't do it? What happens if I do it? Now, this comes back to something I think I've mentioned before about comfort, yeah? So the comfort of not doing it is very short-lived, yeah? But that then brings long-term potential discomfort because the less you do, the more uncomfortable you're going to get. The discomfort, or what you perceive to be discomfort in your mind of doing the activity, will result in the comfort of knowing you have done it and the payoff of doing it. Okay, so let's say you look out your window, and I'm here in the UK, it's cold, there's a bit of snow around at the moment, a bit of frost. Some people probably think, oh, I don't really want to go for a run. This is not about safety, by the way, this is about weather. So I don't really want to go out for a run. However, if I do, I will feel this way if I do. Not I feel this way now, I will feel this way if I do. So I'm going to the gym in a bit, and I'm thinking, oh, I will feel this way once I've been to the gym. So I'm thinking to myself, I will feel better once I've been. I'm not thinking, should I go? I'm thinking, well, I'll feel better once I've been. And that's a payoff. And anybody can do that. You don't have to be special and you don't have to do any of these things. Now, one of the other problems with motivation is that when we say somebody else is quote unquote more motivated than us, that's saying really that we lack something. So we're lacking something that somebody else has. So if we constantly think about lack and we think that person has something that I lack, you'll always be in a lack mindset. That's what comparison does, and we've talked about comparison before. That's another problem with motivation. We think that other people are more motivated than we are, and they're not. Other people just understand their payoffs. There is a discipline thing there, potentially. Like, I'll give you an example with myself. Like, we've got 2 young kids. We've got no help at all. So if I go for a long run on a weekend, it is better for me to go out early in the morning because I can get back by the time my kids wake up. Now, I've done my work for the day in that sense. So my wife can take my daughter or son to wherever she needs to take them to. And then I've done my bit. I've done my exercise. What I don't want to do is be one of those people that says, well, I can't possibly do my exercise because of this situation. I say, well, how can I be more disciplined to accommodate that situation? And what that does for me psychologically, that discipline, is I get the payoff of knowing that I've done my work and I don't have to worry about doing my exercise later on during the day because it's already been done. Exercise is very, very important to me. It always has been since I lost weight, because once you've lost weight, you don't need motivation. I don't need motivation to stay in shape because I've seen what the other feels like. I've seen what lethargy and hating yourself, and I've seen all that, and there's no way I'm going back there. So that's a little window into the way I think. But honestly, if you change the way you think about motivation, so if you think about it, I need to move. That's my focus, movement. Now, that movement could be anything. That could be a 5-minute walk around your block, do you know what I mean, or outside your house. It could just be something, because everyone's at different places, right? And what we don't want to do is we don't want to say you have to do X. So what we don't want to say here is you have to go for a 5K run or a 10K run or whatever. All we want to say is you need to move, because that movement will then more than likely bring on more movement, which is my very primitive way of describing the law of inertia in physics. If you move, you're more likely to continue moving, yeah? And if you move, you're more likely to get more results, and the more results you get, the more motivated you will feel. If you're sitting there waiting for motivation, it's not coming. If you think motivation, you're going to be more motivated in January and you're going to do nothing for 5-6 weeks, it's not coming, because what will happen is your inactivity will compound and decrease your motivation. There's also something called the law of diminishing intent, which basically states the longer you leave something, the less likely you are of doing it. So do you think you're going to be more motivated by doing nothing? If you do nothing, you're more likely to do nothing. If you do something, you're more likely to then want to do more things that make you feel a certain way. And if that feeling you want to call motivation, that's the game, okay? And this is, anybody can do this, okay? And this is why I keep saying that point, because sometimes you might get that little voice, which I've heard a lot in my game. I've been doing this a long time in the fitness world of, it's all right for you because story. It's not all right for anybody. We're all going through different things in different ways. Anybody can apply those principles I've mentioned today. And if you think, well, I'm not as motivated as another person, again, you're coming from a lack-based mindset. And if you don't fix that, you're always going to be in that lack-based mindset, and you're never going to think you can do anything at all. Okay, so to conclude that point, you need to move. You need to do something in order to get the momentum you need, to get the results you need, to elicit the feeling, which you can call motivation, to keep you on track. Now, if you're doing a spring marathon, because a lot of people that I speak to or listen to this, I'm assuming, are doing a spring marathon, this is really, really important here, because you think, oh, my training starts January, I'll be fine. You can't think like that. That's why I've started. I mean, my training starts next week, so I've got to be a little bit more on point. But you can't think like that, folks, because if you do nothing for 5 weeks and then expect to hit a 16-week cycle, all guns blazing in January, I've never seen that work, because you need to build a foundation and a base to get yourself mentally and physically ready to be able to approach that training. Because if anything goes wrong in that training, you're really going to struggle. You're really going to struggle, because you're going to fall behind. And that's not only a physical thing as part of your cycle, it's also a mental thing as well, because you'll get inside your own head and you convince yourself you won't do it. I've seen so many people absolutely implode when it comes to marathons because they miss a week or whatever, for whatever reason, and because they haven't got any support or coaching or guidance or anything in the background to like get them back on track, they just fall completely off, and they either get round and it's really painful, or they quit entirely. So you have to think differently, and you have to think in terms of movement is the key, then the results, then the motivation comes. And I was having this conversation with somebody this morning. I think if you've got a spring marathon come up and that's not enough of a motivation to go and do something, or enough of a reason, or a payoff to go and do something, I think you're really struggling. If that's not a driver to get you going now, I think you've got to look at that, in my own opinion. And I've got nothing but love for you. I'm not judging you there, but you've really got to look at that. So in conclusion, again, because I want to keep these nice and bite-sized, step 1, movement's the goal. Step 2, think in terms of payoffs. Don't think in terms of motivation. And the easiest way to do that is think we believe motivation comes first. What we really should be focusing on is how we feel after the activity that we've done and how we're going to feel, because that's the thing that's the most important, I feel, on that sense. So that is a quick 10 or so minute introduction to the myth of motivation. So I promise you, if you apply that, it will really help you, and it will really help you change the way you look at things, and it will really help you get the results you want, because ultimately you've got to move to get the results you want in whatever way that is. Yeah, it's got to be right for you in whatever station that you're at, but you need to move to get the results you want. So there you go, the myth of motivation. So thank you very much for listening. As always, I do appreciate it. Don't forget to like and share this podcast wherever you get your podcasts from. We'll drop a favourite on it or a love heart. I'd appreciate that. The sharing is really, really useful as well. So if you could do that with any of your running friends or anybody that you know, that's much appreciated. Hop on over to 12 Months to Marathon on Instagram to follow me to get all your free daily content and tips. Or if you want to have a chat about running coaching, just drop me a message or a comment on one of my posts with 26.2. I'm going to have a chat about your goals for next year, particularly if you're doing a spring marathon and you need some support. Happy to have a chat to you, but if not, I just appreciate all the support you've given me, for following me, for supporting me. Thank you so much so far. Have a fantastic day, whatever you're doing, and I'll look forward to speaking to you all again soon.